Hi, friends. How are you? I'm Nicole, and this is Crimes with Cole. So, hello. How are you guys doing today? I hope you all are having an amazing day and are ready for another crazy crime story. In today's case, we will be talking about a young, beautiful girl who had gone missing, but after discovering her marriage was not as loving as everyone thought it was, it started to point fingers at her husband. But did he hate his wife so much that he would have taken her life? And while it's easy for all of us from the outside looking in to ask the question, why didn't she just leave if her marriage was that horrible? It's not as easy to answer that question when you're the one in the situation. Today, we will be talking about Elizabeth Sullivan. Elizabeth Sullivan was born in Hampton, Virginia, which is about 20 minutes from the military base in Norfolk, where she had met a man by the name of Matt in 2010. Elizabeth was a very witty, outgoing person, and Matt was like a bit shy and kind of kept to himself for the most part, making the two polar opposites. But that did not stop the two from becoming infatuated with one another. Elizabeth and Matt soon had started dating, and their relationship really blossomed rather quickly. Matt knew he was going to be reassigned in San Diego and didn't want to leave Elizabeth. There was just something about her, and he knew he didn't want to lose that. So he had proposed, and of course she said yes. The two of them had gotten married in 2010 and started planning their big move across the country. And during this time is when Elizabeth had discovered she was pregnant with their first baby, a little girl. So within the first year of being together, the couple had gotten married, moved across the country, and found out they were expecting. And while this would cause most of us to go like crazy at some point, Elizabeth handled all of the change rather well. Once they settled into their new 3-story townhome and Elizabeth gave birth, they named their baby girl Ryan, and Elizabeth loved being a mother. She was always very close to her family, like always reaching out to them. So when they moved and it was just her and Matt, you can imagine the emptiness that had brought. Just a complete shock from going to being surrounded by family all the time to just kind of starting your new family. But when baby Ryan was born, I think that filled that void for Elizabeth. I think it really helped her find her purpose and gave her a meaning in a sense. She gave birth to another baby girl, naming her Greer a couple years later. And with Matt always gone because of deployment, Elizabeth really just was the best mom that she could be for her girls. She made their house a home and made sure everything was always taken care of. In 2014, things started to make their way to the surface in the family. Ryan was now 4, and Greer was now 2, and it was showing just how much this marriage was falling apart between Elizabeth and Matt. Maybe it was the distance, or maybe it was the fact that within the first 5 years of their relationship, so much had changed for them. But whatever it was, they went from this happy, loving couple to what you could almost call roommates. They slept in separate beds, lived separate lives just under the same roof. On October 14th, 2014, a 911 call was made reporting Elizabeth missing, and it wasn't Matt who had called it in. It was Elizabeth's friend Nathan. Nathan and Elizabeth had met a few years back and became rather close. So when Elizabeth wasn't texting or calling Nathan back, he started getting concerned. Elizabeth had an appointment with a divorce attorney the day prior on October 13th. So when she didn't even attempt to call Nathan, who she told everything to, It instantly drew suspicion. The police took Elizabeth's disappearance serious, but they couldn't help but question if maybe after finding out a little bit more about Elizabeth, if maybe she did up and just leave. As the police started talking to everyone in Elizabeth's life, they started piecing together who she was in hopes that it could help lead them to where she was. They first spoke with her husband, Matt, and discovered that her and Matt's relationship had not been very good, especially in the last couple months. And many of her friends were able to confirm that. Matt kept making it seem like Elizabeth was just not in a good headspace, that she had severe depression issues, she would self-harm, partook in heavy drug usage, and always went out and just did her own thing. He said that she just started behaving in this manner that she had never behaved in before. When the police asked to come into the townhome to look around, one detective had gone in and glanced in all the rooms, and nothing seemed out of place or drew their attention to it. So it started to make the police question, did Elizabeth leave on her own free will? Was she just sick of this life she had created over the last 4 years? Elizabeth's friend Nathan, the one who called her in missing, did tell the police that he and Elizabeth had done some hardcore drugs the weekend prior to her missing and that they were going out a little bit more often than they used to. But also he told the police that Elizabeth was scared of Matt and had been for a while. That there had been multiple times when Elizabeth would confide in him, telling him about Matt's abusive behaviors. Elizabeth's other best friend from back home in Virginia was also able to confirm her being scared of Matt. She told the police that one time in March 2014, she and Elizabeth had been FaceTiming, and at this time, she could hear Matt in the background clearly upset and yelling at Elizabeth, and also saw how he had thrown his burrito at Elizabeth, hitting her in the back of the head. But what had really ultimately made the police question what motive would Matt have to be so nasty and angry towards his wife was what they found out next. They discovered that Matt's parents and Elizabeth never got along. And I'm not talking about like just putting on a fake smile when they come over. I'm talking Elizabeth was in the process of getting a restraining order against them, and they were forbidden to be in that townhome. They also had discovered that a month prior to Elizabeth's disappearance, she had been on some online dating apps. She had decided that she wanted to start dating again as her marriage was ending, and she was planning on ending it legally soon anyways. So she created dating profiles and met a guy on there and had met up with him a couple times. On one of the occasions of meeting up with this guy had noticed 2 car seats in Elizabeth's car and thought to himself, what if she's leaving her kids at home alone to come see me? Being neglectful. Like, what if she's neglecting her kids so she could come see me? So he wanted to take all the precautions, and he called CPS, giving them Elizabeth's address. When CPS arrived at the townhome, Matt answered the door, and because of this, it all came out that Elizabeth had an online dating profile and was being unfaithful. This pissed Matt off, as I would assume it would make anyone livid who found this out. But Matt didn't stray from his story that Elizabeth had ran off, even though her car was at the townhome on the 13th. He continued to push this narrative and went as far as to call 911 to tell them he had proof that she had willingly left. During this call, he had told the police that money had been withdrawn from their joint account and that she was trying to frame him to make it look like he did something. But investigators were never able to prove that it was Elizabeth who had actually withdrew that money. However, Elizabeth's father had flew out to San Diego as soon as he heard because he wanted to find his daughter. He knew his daughter would never leave those girls. But that didn't stop Matt from talking to the media. And he made sure that the media and those watching knew how grief-stricken he was, how negative this entire situation was for him, all the effects it had put on him. And he still somehow managed to word it just right so that it sounded like there was a possibility that Elizabeth had actually left. He made it a point to mention how he had lost 25 pounds because of all of the stress and depression this had brought on to him, and never once begged for Elizabeth to come home or be returned. Just kind of kept the spotlight on him. Her father, though, his interview with the media was quite different. He let everyone know indirectly that he felt foul play was involved, some way, somehow, and that he had come over from Virginia to look for her, and that he has faith. She's out there somewhere, and wherever she is, he is willing to go get her. He didn't care what it took. He just wanted his daughter home and safe. And that's what all of her family wanted. They just wanted her home. They started to really reach out to the public to bring awareness that she was missing, to see if anyone knew anything. They shockingly did have someone call in stating that they saw Elizabeth at a soccer field near where she lived on October 19th around 11:30 a.m., wearing black yoga pants and a gray sweatshirt. And while this brought so much hope to her family, this piece of information was made by someone who didn't even know her, and the police were never able to actually confirm that this, in fact, was Elizabeth. But that was it. That was the only clue they had received. And after 10 long months of searching for her, Elizabeth's case went cold, and she became another unsolved mystery until days before the second anniversary. So almost 2 years later, to the exact date of her missing on October 6, 2016, there was a call to the police that a body was found in the San Diego Bay, and everyone couldn't help but wonder, was it Elizabeth? This was a half-mile away from her home, so they waited patiently for the autopsy. They noticed that the body was badly decomposed, and while the investigators had a gut feeling it was Elizabeth, they couldn't make that call yet. What they could do, though, was let Matt know, because what husband wouldn't want to know where his missing wife is? I know if my husband went missing, I wouldn't stop looking until I had a body. So they arrived at the townhome half a mile down the street and knocked on the door. When Matt answered, they noticed moving boxes all packed up. Matt, along with his 2 daughters and newly pregnant fiance, were moving to Delaware. Matt had decided to leave the Navy and move on with life. He clearly moved on in more than one aspect, because they soon discovered that only 2 months after Elizabeth's disappearance, his new fiance had moved in with him. Now, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt and say to myself, well, they were on the brink of divorce. They were in an unhealthy, toxic relationship. But 2 months later, after your wife goes missing and you have someone new in your bed, it just seems a little quick for my liking. But after 2 months of identifying this body that was so badly decomposed, they discovered, based on dental records, that it was indeed Elizabeth. So her case was now brought back to the spotlight, as they now had to figure out what happened to her. The detectives said that Elizabeth's death was a homicide and that she had been beaten badly. Her nose and jaw were broken, along with some of her ribs. She had 5 stab wounds to the chest that were so deep that it caused her ribs to break. They also discovered that Elizabeth's body was badly decomposed, but not the way it should have been had she been in that bay for 2 years. So whoever had her just recently had put her in that bay. They also found out that it looked like her body had been laying on one side for a significant amount of time. And while Matt was the only person who really had a motive to take Elizabeth's life, there were some other person of interest. The police did think that maybe her boyfriend that called CPS on her might have had something to do with it. but he was quickly ruled out. And they were just left with Matt. And the timing of everything just wasn't working in Matt's favor. Now, remember, the police did do a quick walkthrough of their townhome back when Elizabeth went missing and didn't notice anything unusual. But they started to think maybe Matt did take her life in that townhome and successfully hid her there for 2 years. And now, since he and his new family are moving, he had to dispose of the body. So while the police were working on getting a search warrant to thoroughly search this townhome, they discovered that on the exact same day that Elizabeth went missing, Matt went to the Home Depot and bought a high-pressure carpet cleaner. They wanted to know why, and when they asked him, he told them it was because days prior to Elizabeth's disappearance, she had self-harmed herself, mentioning about a time that Elizabeth supposedly broke in a mirror using one of the pieces of the mirror to engage in this activity. And while that may or may not have been true, I would question why your first action wouldn't be to take them to the hospital and get them help. I know it's easier said than done, but if they're inflicting those kind of wounds on themselves, they need professional help and supervision possibly. And yet here he is, just worried about the carpets. The search warrant was granted, and when they finally gained access to the townhome, they found everything they needed to connect all the pieces of this case. And the master bedroom, just looking at the carpet, you would not have noticed anything wrong with it. But when you pulled up the carpet, the padding underneath it was stained, as well as the wood underneath the padding. They had obtained the samples of blood from both the padding and the wood, and no shocker, it was Elizabeth's blood. As they moved up to the attic, they found a knife that was hidden in the walls, and there was blood on this knife. They sent the knife in for testing, and the blood on the knife came back as Elizabeth's. So they had the crime scene in the bedroom, the murder weapon in the attic, and the body in the bay. But what they still had left was the question of, where was she for those 2 whole years they couldn't find her? The police had brought in cadaver dogs, and when they entered the townhome, the dogs went straight to the garage, and inside the garage sat a huge deep freezer, which Matt was so kindly behind during his move. So finally, on January 31st, 2018, Matt was arrested on first-degree murder charges at his home in Delaware. Matt pled not guilty, and his trial began February 21st, 2020. During the trial, the defense team really focused on Elizabeth leaving Matt and trying to frame him and how she was this secret substance-abusing, self-harming mother and wife, and Matt was just trying his best as a husband to help her. The prosecution focused on the facts, which were there was enough blood that tested positive to be Elizabeth's that had soaked through the carpet padding into the hardwood floor. There was a knife found with Elizabeth's blood on it in the attic. There was a body found in the bay that, based on the autopsy, was freshly put in the bay and lying on one side for a long period of time. And there was a deep freezer that would have explained that. After a month-long trial, Matt was found guilty on second-degree murder charges and sentenced to 16 years. Shockingly, or maybe it isn't shocking at this point, but when Matt got up to make his statement after the trial, instead of saying sorry for taking the life of, his daughter's mother, the woman who was someone's daughter, friend, sister, he said that he felt his trial was unfair. Not that he is sorry, but just that it wasn't fair, that he didn't get to bring in certain witnesses to testify on his behalf. As for their daughters, they did end up living with Elizabeth's parents, which I think is wonderful because they can always share the memories of how wonderful Elizabeth truly was and how much she loved being a mom. But it's sad because they've been robbed of a mom and a dad. And while Matt's family didn't have anything to do with Elizabeth's murder, those babies don't get to have all that extra love that I'm sure that they would give them as well. It's a really sad case. No matter how much justice was served for certain people, it doesn't take away the pain and the hurt that will forever linger in many people's lives. But that is all I have for today. You guys will have to let me know what you think. And until next time, please remember to be safe, and I will see you then. Bye.